men are putting Botox and fillers into their scrotums and their penises, and they're calling it Bocox. I'm going to break down this trend with my dear friend Dr. A Stanford trained medical professional who specializes in optimized wellness and aesthetics. Here we go. Dr. A, thank you for joining me. So you and I have talked before about Scrotox, and the new trend that we're looking at is what they're calling Bocox, which is the insertion of filler and Botox into penises. I'm going to stop there for people who are registered. Yeah, can you describe both of those things for me and what the difference is?
Yeah, sure. So generally, Botox and fillers are different compounds. Botox is a molecule that relaxes muscle. Okay, so it's injected into a muscle layer and it kind of just disappears. It doesn't hang around. You don't get any volume out of it. Whereas fillers are a gel-like product and they are volumizers, right? So think of lips, think of cheeks, right? We all know really bad Botox and fillers because it looks like somebody's flying and their lips are over there and they're ducks. Volume with fillers and then relaxing of muscle with Botox.
So this new trend is that men are putting all these various compounds into their balls and into their penises. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's fascinating, right? So there is a trend, and some people trace it back to more of this European style of aesthetic. And some of the trends seem to have started there around these kinds of treatments. I don't know nationally how many people are looking for it, but there is more hits and more talks and more services offered around Botox, whether it's for the scrotum, Scrotox, or for penile enhancement with Botox and fillers.
So the Scrotox piece, I assume, is primarily aesthetic, right? It just makes your ball sack look prettier, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of. It's not the nicest thing to look at, I will say. But the penis bit, what does that impact aside from just the aesthetic piece?
Well, let's talk about Scrotox a little bit,
Okay.
because it actually does change, right? So say somebody has excessive sweating, right? You can sweat a lot in your arms. You can actually sweat a lot in your scrotal area. So it actually will help prevent sweating down there, right? So it actually does have a medical purpose, but it relaxes it and the ball sack and the scrotal sac will actually get smoother and hang a little bit lower because of the injection into that muscle. The muscle itself actually retracts the ball sack up. So if you inhibit that, it'll sit a little lower and it can appear bigger and smoother.
I'd like to see that someday, but before and after. And then the penis.
Yes. So usually with this penile enhancement, it's a combination of both. So it's a combination of filler, increase the length of it, and you can actually increase the girth of it. And you can put Botox in it so it doesn't retract as much. So you inhibit it so the penis can actually be a little bit longer because of that.
And to men that are watching, I'm sure that sounds great. What are some of the downsides or the cons of procedures like this?
So any procedure, you have to be super careful, right? I mean, this is, first of all, a sensitive area. So proceed with caution. Numbing is highly recommended. But anytime you break skin, there's always a small chance of bleeding or bruising, right? Obviously, it can be tender and it could be painful and it can last a day or two. But this area doesn't, unless you're walking around without clothes on, it's not well ventilated. So the risk for infection is actually higher. Excuse me. So those are sort of the more standard things. Like when you do Botox or fillers anywhere in your face, you have to always be careful of those three things. But in particular, down there, if we're talking about filler, the structure of the penis is pretty vascular, meaning there's a lot of blood flow in and out of there. So injecting filler into that area is particularly important because you don't want that filler to travel anywhere. And you want to get into the right space.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but these are not mainstream procedures yet. I mean, men over the last few decades have been getting more Botox in their face. You and I have talked about that. Ageism, especially in places like Silicon Valley, where you and I both are.
Right.
But is this still experimental? Is there enough data to even know the long-term implications?
So there's not real studies around this, I'd say. I mean, you do have to be careful. There is some talk about sperm count being temporarily reduced when you do this, but I haven't seen anything quantified. So it's not like you're going from 100,000 to 50,000. Nobody really knows. I don't know if anybody's actually doing studies around this. There's studies around technique, but not in terms of complications. Until complications happen, then you'll start to see more around it. But yeah, I mean, I do think there are more people seeking this out. There's definitely more talk about this in the media.
Right, absolutely. I mean, one of the articles that I recently saw was in the SF Standard, and they were talking about this exact thing. But what concerned me about the population that they were talking about is that they were advocating for these procedures and linking it to longevity. Like
Mm,
there's a health benefit. What concerned me also is that the demographic that they were talking to seemed to be younger men,
mm.
20 people in their late 20s and their early 30s. And I just wonder, because at the end of the day, it's a little ironic. These are foreign chemicals going into your body. So how does
Yeah.
it work in terms of the longevity argument?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely clear how this would link to longevity. It can link to confidence. It
Mm.
could link to feeling more masculine. I'd say there's that stereotype, the bigger your junk is, the more manly you are, right? So I could see that discussion being held. It does not improve performance per se. It's more of a physical change, right, that you're doing. In terms of longevity, like, if you're happier,
Mm.
you're going to have a better health span. But I don't think this is going to change anything on the mechanistic level or your mitochondrial or any of the cellular processes. I think it's more supratentorial in terms of how it helps. That's a big word, by the way.
It is a big word. I was
I mean,
wondering if I can
brain.
spell it.
Yeah.
I'm with you. In my world, if people can feel better about themselves, I wish everybody could just accept what they have and how they have it, but that's not the world we live in, especially with the media and the images and these ideas of perfect masculinity and perfect femininity as we see them. So I get it. But I am concerned about it being this is going to help you live longer and you're going to all that kind of stuff. But how would you advise people who are considering this?
Yeah, so talk to your healthcare professional,
Mm.
who you trust about, is this an option for you? Is it something that is safe for you? Or if you don't know anybody who has done a Botox procedure, go interview one or two docs who've done this, or three or four or five. I don't know. Online reputations are kind of hard to sort through because like people can put whatever they want out there. But when you meet somebody face to face, when you meet their staff, when you see how they work, you'll get a much better sense of how they can function and help you. The one thing I would say is be careful with any procedures that you have, that whoever does it has to be able to help you if something goes wrong, right? So nobody should do something in my book that they can't undo
Mm.
or help you if some complication happens. These are things that have risk.
We will go into those potentially in a part two. Dr. A, thank you for joining me. For all of you watching there, I'm going to tag Dr. A's information below, and yeah, keep tuned. Subscribe to Kaamna Live because we're going to keep getting to these really cutting edge topics. Thank you.